All right, welcome back to College Football Addiction. I've got Gerry Hamilton with us from On Texas Football. Going to talk a little bit about, I feel like we've had a few games of the year, but this is another one that's coming up. Bama, Georgia was big, and then obviously Ohio State, Oregon big last week, and then maybe this is part 3 that we're getting. Gerry, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. It's going to be a wild scene in Austin Saturday. That's for sure.
Yeah, I went to that Bama Georgia game, and I only have so many, I guess, hall passes to leave my wife with the kids for the weekend. But if I could be anywhere this weekend, it would probably be in Austin. So
You got Formula One racing as well in Austin, and Eminem's having a concert around it. So the cheapest hotel within a mile or and a half of University of Texas campus is $775 a night.
yeah, that's absurd. My wife's actually going. The other reason is my wife's going to Miami for Taylor Swift. So
Oh, there you go.
she
Speaking
trumped
of
me on this.
775,
Yeah, I was gonna say yeah. So fortunately, before anybody judges me, she got those face values. So don't be judging us too hard for for her going. So all right, Red River last week. Before we talk about Georgia, certainly not taking anything away from Texas at all, but Oklahoma's sort of a disaster right now, a mess going on. How is it hard to extrapolate like really where both teams are, or what it means for both teams when something like the Red River rivalry happens like it did Saturday?
Well, I think the tough thing for Brent Venables is it gives you less margin for error. I mean, yes, he just got a big contract extension, but if he turns around and those offensive struggles continue and you lose at home to South Carolina, then people start warming up your seat.
Sure.
I mean, that's what happens when you get blown out by a rival is, okay, if things don't turn around and you already made a quarterback change, and what made it tougher on Oklahoma is Dylan Gabriel beats Ohio State at Oregon.
Yeah.
And the guy they replaced him with, they let Dylan Gabriel walk. The guy they go to, Jackson Arnold, bench. Then they go to Michael Hawkins, a true freshman. So they Brent kind of backed himself into a corner with that quarterback scenario. But now with the offensive line struggles, the receivers are injured, the fans don't care anymore. You just lost 34-3 and didn't look competitive after the first 9 minutes against Texas.
Yeah. What about from the Texas side?
They don't want excuses, right?
Yeah. What about from the Texas side? I mean, obviously got to be on cloud 9 winning a rivalry game like that, but is there some like, well, Oklahoma's terrible, we'll find out this week?
No, I think this one's going to be celebrated till Tuesday night. I would say, look, a blowout win over Oklahoma, because if you look at the history from when Bob Stoops got to Oklahoma versus Texas, Oklahoma's had the upper hand on Texas. So that's 2 of the last 3 years Texas has blown out Oklahoma. The one 2 years ago, Davis Bevel's the quarterback. They were very injured at the quarterback position, and Oklahoma had no chance. This year, their offense was bad, but Texas fans, they really are relishing this one. They are enjoying this blowout win, because last year after Oklahoma beat Texas, it seemed like there was a month of celebrating on social media with Venables and Stutzman. So Texas fans know they're still eating corn dogs at Fletcher's. They're still enjoying this one out at the State Fair, and now they're back in the work world. But to your point, there's a lot more at stake for Texas this season. They got that out of the way. Texas was favored by 17 for a reason. They handled the business. The defense continues to look really good. Now Georgia comes to town, the top program in college football the last 3 or 4 years. I don't think that. I think that's inarguable at this point. They've lost one regular season game in 3 years. So here comes Georgia, the top dog in the SEC, in Texas' first season in the SEC. And this is look, I also cover recruiting. There's going to be 50 plus combined 5-star and 4-star kids in Austin for this game.
Yeah.
This is a massive game, not just for the season, but also for recruiting purposes. Texas hadn't had one like this at home in recruiting, maybe since Alabama in 2022. But I don't even think it compares, because Sark was still building. Yeah. This is number 1 ranked Texas coming off a playoff season in which they already blew out Michigan. Ann Arbor now blew out Oklahoma and Dallas, and you're ranked number 1, a consensus number 1. Texas went into the Cotton Bowl ranked number 1 for the first time since '84 last week.
Yeah, and it does feel like in a college football landscape that everything seems so wide open. Like, it doesn't seem like there are a ton of dominant teams. I mean, Texas probably at the top, Oregon's up there. Georgia, if they were to win this, would probably catapult themselves back up. I think Ohio State's still considered well, but like, it seems pretty wide open too. that considered, how hard is it, do you think, to play back-to-back games, a rivalry win where you're very emotional, and then have, like you just said, the top program in the country coming in?
I think this is easy for Texas because one thing I've watched with this program as Sark's built it is they became big game hunters. When you recruit three straight top five classes, these guys want to go play against the best. The guys out of the portal, Isaiah Bond, Andrew Makuba, they played in all these big games, right? Trey Moore comes from UTSA to Texas because he wants to bet on himself against the best. So the hardest thing for Sark was getting Texas up for UTSA, UL Monroe, and Mississippi State back-to-back games at home.
Yeah.
This was the easy part for Texas. Now, physically, and again, but they weren't really taxed last week. Now, they did lose Derek Williams, their best alley cat run stopper at safety for the season. Sark announced that this morning. So they had a key loss out of that, but otherwise they're as healthy as they can be at this point in the season. Isaiah Bond, we'll see where his ankle's at midweek, but these guys are up for this game. They've been waiting on the Oklahoma and Georgia game. I think if Texas were to win Saturday, and we talked about Vanderbilt next week, are they going to be up 3 weeks in a row against the actual Vanderbilt team with a pulse? That's the question. But Texas is going to be flying high against Georgia. And I'll say this. If Georgia doesn't play their best game of the year, then something's missing in Athens right now because they're playing for their lives, their playoff lives in some regard right now.
Yeah. Quinn Urus came back this week, a little rusty to start, kind of pulled things out. What thoughts just for him going forward and against a Georgia defense that does have a lot of talent?
Yeah. So the one thing that was interesting was Georgia gave up some plays over the top against Mississippi State. They actually had a couple of busts, and it's kind of uncharacteristic of Georgia. Georgia doesn't have, to me, talking about it before the season, they don't have the guys up front on the defensive line that the 21 and 22 team where they could just suffocate you. And it's like game over. Golly, thanks for coming. You had 160 yards. I mean, they don't have that. They still have a bunch of NFL players, though. It's going to be interesting to me. Texas offensive line was the key against Oklahoma. I think the offensive line is the key again against Georgia. If Texas negates the strength, Georgia's front seven defensively is their strength. Their back end has had some issues this year, and they're still searching a little bit. Doesn't mean they aren't going to play great Saturday. This has been the same for the Michigan game, the Oklahoma game, which the front seven was Oklahoma's strength. Same with Michigan, even though Will Johnson's a really good corner. They had some safety issues. But now with Georgia, if you negate the front, then Texas has so much speed for the people that haven't watched Texas. They have so much speed at the skill spots. It's tough to defend them with Sark's eye candy and everything he does from a play calling standpoint. If Texas offensive line plays really well and gives Quinn clean enough pockets, Texas is going to have guys open, even against Georgia. They're that fast and that talented this year.
What about the other side of the trenches? Georgia's offensive line, Texas's front. Georgia, historically, a great running team. Carson does a good job back there, too, when he's got time. Just thoughts on Texas's front 4-7 getting after Georgia.
Yeah, so Georgia will be interesting. Wilson's been out for a couple of games at center. Tate Ratledge is still expected to be out, I think, until the Florida game. So you don't replace an All-American at guard and then lose your center right next to him. Drew Bobo's filled in admirably. Mike Bobo's son at center. I would guess Wilson plays this week, so they get their starting center back. So Georgia's had to shuffle a little bit on the offensive line with those injuries I think that was Kentucky game is where both those guys got hurt. I know obviously Ratledge did. So the Georgia offensive line I thought was 100% going to be their strength going into the season. I thought of their entire team was going to be their offensive line. I thought they had multiple second contract NFL type players. Are they going to establish the run game against the Texas front? So I think Georgia, if they can establish the run against the Texas front, and that includes Anthony Hill, right? And Texas does have good depth on the edges. They've really improved there under Sark. If Georgia can establish the run game, if they can give lanes to Travis Etienne's the starter, but Nate Frazier, for people that haven't seen Nate Frazier, he is a jetpack with size out running the football. He is a tremendous freshman running back with a really high upside. If they can give those guys some lanes, then that's gonna pressure Texas to kind of change up what they ideally want to do defensively. Where Texas has been so strong is communication this year. That's where they've greatly improved as a defense. Georgia's the first offense that could stress that a little bit. So again, I think it's a huge offensive line game this week because both teams have really good fronts. Both have multiple NFL players on their defensive fronts and linebacker. So which offensive line is going to establish enough run game and then give your pocket passing quarterback time to get the ball down the field? Because I think whoever does that best, Carson Beck's got to protect the football a little bit better than he has this season. For me, it's going to be a wild environment Saturday in Austin. But whoever does that is going to have a big advantage in this game because I do think both Georgia's Raw's gone. Obviously, Young is gone, but they still have guys who can run. Anthony Evans is mixing in. Dylan Bell's a good player for them. Dominic Lovett, London Humphreys can run. They have playing 3 tight ends that are all good players. Georgia can put up points and mount drives and have enough explosives if Texas defensive front doesn't win against the Georgia offensive line. The game within the game is bigger, but the offensive lines are where I really look in this game to start.
Is there anything about this game from the Texas perspective, or what about this game maybe worries you the most? Is it, a certain matchup? Is it the moment? Is it just, anything and everything? What worries you the most from the Texas perspective?
Texas was down 3-0 to Oklahoma. It's the first time they were not leading all season. They went into the Oklahoma game. I think it was Texas, Navy, and maybe Army were the only 3 teams that hadn't been at a deficit all year, that had led every quarter of every season and every minute of every game they played. So nobody's got up 2 scores on Texas. Nobody's hit them with back big play, boom. You come back and you have a turnover, and boom, then they have a short field and run it and get up 10 or 14 points on you. Texas hasn't had that adversity. They've had adversity through injury. They've had some adversity through, maybe some self-inflicted on penalties. But they haven't had adversity where you look up at the scoreboard and you're like, my gosh, we're down 10 or 14 points here, and this team across from us is just as talented as we are. That's the thing. That's the one adversity Texas hasn't had this year. And they will have it eventually, you would think. Is Georgia the only offense that can do it to them? I don't know. Maybe A&M at the end of the year, maybe at Arkansas. But that would be the one thing for me is if you get in a real adverse situation, what are you going to do? Because you haven't been in it this year. But I do think it's an experienced team. The other thing I would say is Texas they gave up a run fit miss touchdown to UTSA. They gave up Mississippi State got behind them a couple times, but nobody's made huge pass plays down the field against them where it's like, okay. And the guys start looking around saying, this hasn't happened to us this year.
Yeah.
So does somebody hit you with a couple of big pass plays, a touchdown, a 60-yarder, and you run them out in the red zone? Those are the 2 things I look for from Texas. And then because I just think offensively, they've gotten past their running back injuries. Cedric Baxter was a big loss to start the season. Now, will they miss that downhill runner at some point this season in a particular game? We're going to find out because you do have the Georgia front, you have Kentucky and Deion Walker, you have A&M. Is still left on this schedule. They passed the test against Michigan, though, early in the season. But that would be it for me. Do you get down 2 scores? How do you react?
Yeah.
If somebody hits a couple of big bomb type of pass plays on you, which hadn't happened, and they result in 7 points and then 10 points or something, how do you react? That's what Texas hasn't faced this year.
It's really early in the week, so you may not have a prediction in this one just yet, but do you have a lean? Do you have kind of how you think this thing goes from, we'll give you a lot of grace because there's a lot to be determined before Saturday, but how do you think this ends up?
Before the season, I picked Georgia to beat Texas. But maybe Georgia goes and plays their best game of the season. I mean, I hate to be long-winded here, but everything should tell you Georgia's going to play their best game of the season. They were pushed to the limit against Kentucky, didn't play well offensively. They lost at Alabama. Alabama caught them in empty and got out to a big start. They came back. Carson Beck had 3 turnovers. They don't play well defensively against Mississippi State. So everything should tell you Georgia's won 2 of the last 3 national championships. They've lost exactly 2 games, both to Alabama in tight games. They should go play their best game of the season. They already have 1 loss. If you take 2, you're pretty much margin for error is gone if you're going to be a playoff team. Everything tells you Georgia should play their best game of the season. I just haven't seen enough to think they are right now because of all the off the field stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, Raw Thomas gone, now Young gone. They're a confusing team for me because this is the first time I haven't seen them play up to their talent level in a while. If they do, though, I think the game could go either way. The Georgia I predicted to beat Texas before the season, I haven't seen. So right now, I would go Texas 27-23.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Texas is playing better football and they're at home. So why would I go with Georgia when they haven't shown that game yet this year? Maybe they do. If they don't, people are going to start kind of wondering if Georgia's on a little bit of a slow decline.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think I would lean Texas here. I mean, Georgia, certainly. If they come out and play their best game, it's hard for anybody to beat them. They just haven't shown it yet. They haven't shown that they are capable of putting together 60 minutes, so we'll see. Gerry, where can people follow you? Where can they find more of your work?
Yeah, on Texas Football YouTube channel. Bobby Burton, myself, our team, CJ Vogel, Rod Babers, former Texas all-conference player, corner, NFL corner there. On Texas Football YouTube, on TexasFootball.com. Come talk about all of it. We have the big visitors list. It's going to be unbelievable visitors list, and we'll talk about Texas and SEC with you all day over there.
Yeah, like I said, I was in Tuscaloosa for the first one, and then Saturday night in Eugene. I wasn't there, but that was a great. I'm hoping we get another classic. I don't want to see what you guys did to Michigan again. I want to see a good game on Saturday. So could be game of the year part 3. So Gerry, I appreciate you a ton for hanging out.
Thank you for having me.